Yes, good morning, students. I hope you are all able to hear me. Good afternoon, rather. So it's a second class today, and it's overall the third class of this series, which is on October current affairs. Right? A couple of days back, you might remember I took the first class. Today morning, took the second. Today is the third. I'll take one more for October. So for every month, it'll be around four classes. That's the plan basically for now. So on that note, let me begin. Let me just hear my voice once. Yes, yes, my voice is coming loud and clear. So on that note, I can begin straight away. This is a bit on Gradeup, so just take a look at what are the various advantages we provide. So just brief introduction on myself as well. My name is Aritro Das Gupta. I've been with with Gradeup for a couple of weeks now. I've taken a few classes. I took some strategy sessions. Now I'm taking some content classes. Overall, I've got over a decade's experience, more than 11 years into teaching. I started at a training firm, was there for about a year. It was an environment-based consultancy. After that, I was with a university associated for 4 years in India as well as in Dubai. I spent about 6 months on a project in Dubai. After that, for about a year, I worked full time at a coaching institute in Gurugram, Haryana. Mm, For the last 5 years, I've been a freelancer. I do various things. I've also been published internationally. I'm a content writer, done a lot of stuff domestically. I've taken soft skills training programs all over the country. And of course, I'm also now into online teaching for the last 9 to 10 months. That is something which has been last year, it's been a routine pretty much. Right. So, on that note, I am beginning. So this is our batch. Look at the enrollments. These are some of the new teachers, of course. These are some of the teachers we have. It's an existing batch, so I'll give you some more details. नीचे सारा दिया हुआ है हमारा contact number वगैरह, तो आप please join कर सकते हैं. And of course, there is this for law and for BBA both. So this is something that is available for you guys. ठीक है, मैं आपके साथ कुछ कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर्स भी शेयर करूंगा इन सम टाइम, बट फॉर नाउ लेट मी बिगिन विद द actual content of the class. So whenever it is standalone miscellaneous stuff, October current affairs will be the headline. Whenever I want to talk about one specific aspect, then I will put that as the headline. So पहला चीज जो मैं डिस्कस करना चाहता हूँ is about a particular military exercise. It's called SLINEX. So military exercises from now on every month we'll be doing one or two. During the peak of COVID ये थोड़ा रुक गया था, but हर साल India engages in around 15 to 20 joint military exercises. Military exercises का purpose क्या है? The idea is that two or more countries they engage in joint collaboration. The idea being that you learn something from me, I learn something from you. If there's a real war, we can actually fight together in this. Also, it's like a drill. It's like a mock exercise. So you can also test yourself against the very best, and it also helps build diplomatic ties. Of course, we are not likely to do a military exercise with a country which is not friendly to us, like say a Pakistan, although very recently, last week or so, has been good in the sense of better relations with Pakistan. But the general thing that I was saying, that is right. So Slinex is one we've been doing for many years. It's held every 2 years with Sri Lanka. As the name suggests, it stands for Sri Lanka India Naval Exercise. Bilateral का मतलब है two countries are involved. Trilateral मतलब three. Quadrilateral हो सकता है. Multilateral is many countries are involved. So this is held every year between the two countries. And you can also write down the location. I'll write it down on the chat window. It's at this place called Trincomalee. Trincomalee coast uh, of Sri Lanka. So यहाँ पे is the place that it is hosted in. ठीक है, चलिए. So that's the beauty of current affairs. We flip topics very easily. So I want to talk about this lady Nozomi Okuhara, one of the top badminton players in the world. She has clinched the Denmark Open title, beating three-time world champion Carolina Marin in women's singles finals. Denmark Open is an important badminton event. Denmark is in that way a slightly isolated country in badminton. It's a sport almost completely dominated by East Asia, Southeast Asia, but within Europe, Denmark is one lone exception. Even Spain has some good players. The United Kingdom has some good players, but overall, Denmark is in that sense. In fact, the men's event in the same tournament was won by somebody from Denmark. His name is Anders Antonsen. He actually defeated his fellow compatriot. Compatriot, matlab from the same country. So that is Mr. Rasmus Genke. Right, so these are the winners. ये please थोड़ा देख लें. It's one of the important badminton tournaments. Okay, so as I was saying, कभी भी कुछ standalone topic हो तो फिर मैं अगले topic पे पहुंचूंगा. This is one such example. So I'll talk about FDI. I hope you're all aware of the term FDI. FDI का मतलब है foreign direct investment. So any investment which comes directly in the country. FII is when it is routed via institutions such as via the stock market or portfolio trade. This is direct investment. Now FDI mean there are a couple of slabs. राइट वी हैव 26, 49, 51, 74 एंड 100. मैं इस पे डिटेल में बात करूंगा जब हम इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ेंगे, बट जस्ट फॉर नाउ दिस मच इज एनफ फॉर यू. So these slabs are increased when the government feels we should get more money from abroad. It is reduced when we want to reduce the chances of foreign investors controlling domestic economy, or when we want to protect our domestic investors. So in this case, FDI has been capped in news media. It's actually pretty tight in this sector. So it's 26% only in digital media news sector. Digital news का मतलब है this does not include websites like, let's say, Times Now का website. Times Now is part of the Bennett Coleman group, which has a newspaper, Times of India, many others as well. It has a news channel, Times Now, Mirror Now, ET Now, and it also has websites. So that is not categorized as pure online. This is only for those who are pure online. Examples of pure online news, I can share with you a few. I'll write it down. Examples of pure online news sites in India. I think some of you may have heard of the Quint. There is also the Print. There is Scroll, The Wire, Swarajya Mag. These are some examples. They do not have any, shall we say, um, non-digital publication. They don't have any print media. They don't have TV channels. Pure online news. So इसमें lowest जो slab है, which is 26, which is generally in most sectors, if you see, it was 26% before 1991. In this case, it has been put in. This has been issued by the DPIIT, which stands for the which is one of the departments part of the Ministry of Commerce. The CEO also has to be an Indian. That's another law. And there's a 49% slab for TV news. So TV news includes companies which are pure TV, like Republic or Republic Bharat or NDTV. Times Now still does not categorize because they also have a newspaper. So that's print media, TV media, digital media. That's three different categories, right? These are the slabs. As you can see, this is at the bottom. 26 the bottom, 49 is the second lowest. Okay, now I want to talk about GHI, which is a very important index. I think the earlier class, the one which I held today morning, I had explained to you how indexes are very important, and in every class from now on we are going to cover indexes. Some of you may remember that. So similarly, so now I'll talk about indexes. This is a very important one, global hunger index. So मैंने DARE करवाया था. DARE से ये ज़्यादा important है. Okay, so this is brought out each year by the Concern Worldwide. That's the name of the group, and it is only those countries which are likely to have hunger problems they are studied. So the developed nations like a USA or a UK or a Germany, Japan, South Korea, they are not included in this ranking. So it's only 107 of the countries which are likely to be extremely poor. So India is 94th in that list. So we are 14th from bottom. The 14th maximum hunger rate is likely to be in India. So that is India's rank. Now 17 countries share rank 1. So here rank 1 is not important because rank 1, as I said, you're not actually rank 1. You are a country likely to have problem, but among them you are the better of the lot. So on the other hand, there's an African country. Chad, which has been ranked overall bottom. In 2016, Chad was bottom. Then the last couple of years, it was the Central African Republic which occupied the bottom spot. But this year, the CAR of the Central African Republic has not applied at all for this. They did not, sometimes countries don't participate in some surveys for whatever reason. So that is where Chad has once again taken its spot at the bottom. एक बार जरा आप मैप खोल के या गूगल मैप्स देख के एक बार देख लीजिए कहाँ पे है ये इट्स ट्रिंकोमाली ट्रिन वो लिख दिया गलती से इट शुड बी ट्रिंकोमाली मैंने आई जस्ट ऑब्जर्व दिस सो चार्ट इज रैंक्ड बॉटम एक बार आप देख लीजिए वर्ल्ड मैप इट्स समवेयर इन नॉर्थ इट्स इन सेंट्रल अफ्रीका surrounded pretty much by the Sahara Desert, which is, besides its massive poverty and inequality, that's another major reason for the country's hunger issues, as you may understand. Right. ओके तो मैंने पिछले सेशन में स्टार्स बुल के एक प्रोजेक्ट करवाया था दैट वाज फॉर डोमेस्टिक इंडिया वर्ल्ड बैंक फंडेड नाउ आई विल डिस्कस समथिंग कॉल्ड स्टार्ट ये क्या है स्ट्रेटेजिक आर्म्स रिडक्शन ट्रीटी so the Russian president Mr. Vladimir Putin he has proposed a 1 year extension without conditions of the last major nuclear arms reduction accord which is the new start deal between Russia and USA. Now ये है क्या मैं थोड़ा समझाता हूँ आपको. Have you guys heard about this term? I'll write it down on the chat window. Have you heard of this term Cold War? Has anybody heard of Cold War? Please respond. I want to see your answers there. Right. So basically, during the Cold War was held immediately after the Second World War ended. So this lasted for about 45 years. And during this period, it's called a Cold War because fortunately for the planet, there was no actual war. It was mostly a competition between the two superpowers and their allies. So one was led by the USA. It was an ideological battle. One side was led by the USA, that was supporting capitalism as an economic system. The other side was led by the USSR, which was supporting communism as an economic principle. This was its general capitalism is usually called right wing and communism is left wing. Now there was no actual war, but they had competition regarding who reaches space first, who reaches the moon first, medals won in the Olympics, and of course how much nuclear power do you have. That was pretty much the battle between the two. Besides this, they also had a lot of proxy wars in third countries where instead of directly firing guns on weapons on each other, either one of the two would participate on one side or neither would participate, but they would fund two of the belligerents. Example is in Vietnam, where the US fought the Viet Cong, which was supported by the Soviets. So there was no direct battle between the Soviets and USA. There was a country USSR which later on broke up, Russia being the leader of them. They also had wars in Korea. North was supported by Soviet, South by USA. India and Pakistan in many ways. Pakistan then close US ally. India was closer to the Soviets, and so on and so forth. There were various other battlegrounds as well. Guatemala, Cuba, etc. Right? Uh, they never had a war. Afghanistan, yes, very critical. Now, USSR broke up in the late 80s, early 90s into 15 different countries. Now, one of the fallouts of that, the fact that the Cold War ended peacefully, I would say, after that, it was decided that it's time to disband the nuclear weapons because obviously they do not, there's no point. The very fact that you have so much nuclear weapon means that that is, in case there is a war, there is. You know a chance of a massive fallout. Okay, so there's a new start deal between Russia and USA. So there were various shall we say, agreement signed in order to end the nuclear weapons. One was the CTBT. I'll just write it down. CTBT, or the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. This was one. There was the NNPT, or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This was another. ठीक है, India has not signed a lot of these agreements. So another one was START. START was one of them. It first started in 1991, came into effect in 94. It is now expired, but Russia wants one more year, and that it has been granted. The first one expired in 2009, second one started in 2010 for an initial 10-year period till 2020, but now given a year's extension till 2021. Right. So I now want to talk about a very important political figure, one of the most enigmatic figures. Tragically, India lost him this year. He passed away. He's also been multiple times a union minister. So his name is Sri Ram Vilas Paswan. He was, at this point when he passed away, he was the consumer affairs, food and public distribution minister, union cabinet minister. Uh, he's a leader from a very long time. He first emerged in the late 1970s as a leader from the ground. For various reasons, he never expanded his base much in his home state of Bihar. One of the reasons was he would always be involved with central governments. Lalu Prasad Yadav, who was often his ally, often an adversary, another great political figure. Lalu Prasad Yadav often joked about Mr. Paswan that he was a weatherman. He always knew which side to go. So Mr. Paswan has been part of several national governments at various stages. He has been with both the Modi governments. He was part of the UPA government, was with Vajpayee, was with Mr. PV Narasimha Rao, and the United Front, which lasted for a couple of years between Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee. He had a lot of these things as well. So he has been associated with governments in Delhi from a very long time. In India, we often have this system of people who are not political parties which are not strong enough to win seats, but strong enough to deter somebody else from getting. So you have enough of a vote share, say an 8 to 10% vote share, which is enough to cut into somebody else's vote share. So see, you would include them because in the Indian political system is called first past the post system. So in a particular seat, you need the maximum percentage of the votes. That's it to win. So sometimes the vote share difference between the first and the second party is very less. So if you can add a third one with an 8 to 10% vote share, it may more or less makes up the numbers. That is how he was indispensable to so many governments. At this point, he was a Rajya Sabha member from Bihar. Uh, as far as I know, Mr. Sushil Kumar Modi from the BJP has now replaced him since his seat has been left vacant. He had been an MP 9 times in the Lok Sabha, 8 of them from the same constituency of Hajipur, which is in Bihar. He was founder of the party LJP, Lok Janshakti Party. He had initially been from the JDU, or the Janata Dal United, but then he left the party in 2000. Janata Dal United, he was with Mr. George Fernandez, with Jaya Jetli, with Mr. Nitish Kumar. It was called the Samada Party for a while. Then was called JDU. He then founded his own party, LJP, with major presence in Bihar. In fact, they hold 6 Lok Sabha seats in 2019 in an alliance with the BJP and the JDU. I think they had won 5 the last time before that. Right. So this is the party LJP. It was a member of the NDA in 2019, won all the 6 it contested from. In 2020, however, the party in the Bihar state elections, they split from the NDA, contesting on around 140 odd seats, winning only one of them. They remain pro the BJP, but they wanted to fight separately from the JDU. So that is why they contested separately. Now, Mr. Paswan's son, Mr. Chirag Paswan, who's also an actor, he is now the party chief. Right. So again, beauty of current affairs. Moving straight away, you need to, for a while change your mind From Bihar, we are going to move to France. So completely different terrain. And from the world of Indian politics, we are going to move into international cycling. So this is not uncompetitive either. Both are highly competitive fields. Now, in the sport of cycling, the Tour de France is generally considered the most prestigious event, the one which attracts the maximum eyeballs, and it has been on the international circuit for a very long time. It's an endurance race, it's not a sprint. It takes place over about 2 weeks, and as the name suggests, it's in France. And I mean, for the views alone, one must view this, program. Even if you aren't a fan of cycling as a sport, just to view the pristine, idyllic rural landscape, one has to watch this. So Tour de France, as I said, most important cycling race this year postponed due to the obvious reasons. Now look at the name of the winner. This is interesting. He's the first ever person from a tiny country. Many of you would never even have heard of this country. Has anybody heard of this country? Or let me paraphrase the question a bit. Has anybody heard of the country Yugoslavia? Has anybody heard of the country Yugoslavia? There used to be a country called Yugoslavia, just like the USSR, just like the Czechoslovakia, there was Yugoslavia. And just like the USSR and Czechoslovakia, this country also broke into several parts. Well, Czechoslovakia was a completely peaceful separation. USSR was complex but mostly peaceful. Yugoslavia was very violent. There was a lot of warfare, especially between three of the bigger members, Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia Herzegovina. Between the three of them, um, Slovenia, the most peaceful of the lot, separated, complete peaceful. In fact, it has a per capita income to rival any first world country. I think its income is around the same as Portugal, which makes it a first world developed country. It's an alpine country, almost completely on the Alps, neighbor of Austria, neighbor of Italy as well. So not a bad location to have. From this country, this guy became the first ever cycling champion. His name is Tadej Pogacar, and so in cycling, just like in Formula One, there is some sponsor whom you represent, which in this case was the Team Emirates. In fact, the interesting thing is that even the runner-up, who was in fact the winner of the last stage of Tour de France, is also from the same tiny country. His name is Primoz Roglic, also from Slovenia. An Australian, Richie Porte, finished third. Australia, a traditional giant in the sport of cycling, just like USA to an extent, but mostly dominated by Europeans. People from the United Kingdom, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, even tiny Luxembourg, Spain, Germany, Russia to an extent, they have historically been the dominant nations in cycling. Denmark. Right, I had told you that I'll share with you a phone number. So this is it, 93544999530. Besides calling us, you can also WhatsApp us. That's an option because many of you are more comfortable on WhatsApp. So please go ahead. Right, the 13th slide, total 36 slides. Last couple of the slides are just like this, a bit, no, not GK per se. Okay, some more of the miscellaneous content. Now, MCX stands for Multi Commodities Exchanged, and ICOMDEX stands for India Commodity Indices. They have come up with a new base metal index. Base metal matlab metals which are at their base level, which have not changed as such. Right, so it's called the metal dex, and this is very important. Now I'll spend a class talking about the Abraham Accords. बहुत ही important topic है. So next class में मैं इसको डिटेल में डिस्क्राइब करूंगा Abraham Accords. बट अभी के लिए आप इतना समझ लीजिए कि Israel, which is a Jewish country, has forged peaceful ties with a lot of Islamic countries, Arabic speaking countries. That's where 2020 was unique. It opened up a huge new diplomatic channel with Israel forging ties with several Arabic countries. And in a rare success, this was actually mediated by Donald Trump and his government. So I'll talk about this in detail. Now, this is the first case of a UAE delegation reaching Israel. Right, the first UAE is always some country that takes the first steps. Generally, among Gulf countries, first Gulf country with which launched a space probe to Mars. They also have nuclear energy, coal energies, renewable energy, desalination plants. So, in many ways, the first permanent residency through the Golden Handshake scheme. Right. Now, I want to talk about something which is have you guys heard of genetically modified crops? Genetically modified crops. Has anybody heard of this term? GMO seeds, they're often known as. So, just tell me about it. I'll just take a brief bio break. Give me a minute. Just write down whatever you know about gene edited wheat. Okay, let's continue. So gene edited wheat. Let me see if you have given any responses. Right. So what is gene edited wheat? First of all, what is genetically modified crops? These are crops whose seeds have been altered, whose genes have been altered at the seed to change their properties, and typically this helps when it comes to epidemics. So epidemic में बहुत टाइम एक क्रॉप कंप्लीट वाइप आउट हो जाता है, वो काफी हद तक इसमें बच जाता है. That is the idea behind this plan, and it also increases productivity, hardiness. So such a gene edited wheat has been developed in Argentina. It's the first in the world to develop these drought resistant crops. This is the name. It's a technical scientific name, and it was developed by a couple of local companies like Trigol Genetics and Bioceres, but also with a French company called Florimond Desprez. So these are the couple of players who are involved in this interesting feat. Right? Okay. So October current affairs. Now, I had told you earlier today about the Bihar elections and protocols being changed regarding the star, shall we say, star campaigners. Similarly, another thing that has changed, however, is adjusting for inflation. The Election Commission has given a 10% hike to the amount of money officially that every candidate can spend. So it's not every seat, but every candidate on every seat. There could be 10 candidates, all of them could spend that much money individually. So it's total 77 lakhs per candidate for a Lok Sabha seat, and the figure is 30.8 lakhs in a Vidhan Sabha. Vidhan Sabha is at the state level, Lok Sabha is for the center. So it's an exact 10% hike in both of them. Now, as you can understand, Lok Sabha per seat, there could be many candidates, each of them 77. So you can imagine the amount of money that gets pumped into the economy. So elections are always, at least in the short run, difficult to say long or medium term, but at least in the short term, it brings a lot of windfall into the economy because there's a lot of spending. And right now, you know there are 5 states which are going to the polls. Some stages have already been held in West Bengal and in Assam. So that's where you can see per seat. Now there are 294 seats in West Bengal. That's staggering. Per seat, if several candidates spend this much money, you can imagine the amount of cash infusion on every seat. That is why, and in the Lok Sabha, it's 543 seats. So um, that is why the stock market generally boom immediately after elections. Right. Meanwhile, two countries, both of them are mountainous countries, but that's where the similarities end. The mountain in Peru is very tall. The one in Switzerland is of moderate height. Switzerland is Alps. Peru is the Andes. Andes are the world's second highest mountain range on average. It's also the longest. It's longer than the Himalayas, though slightly shorter. Also, Switzerland is a very rich country. Peru is definitely not. It's a developing country. Now, they recently signed the first carbon offset deal under the Paris Agreement. Again, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what exactly is the Paris Agreement. This was signed in 2015. The idea is that ultimately we have to reduce the impact on climate, right? So, um, right? So the idea is that, see, even if okay, let's talk about some developed country. Let's say USA, obviously, very much, very rich. So in the richer countries, people tend to consume a lot more products than in a developing country. Also, in a country like China, which may not be as rich per capita as USA, but which is a manufacturing hub. So in a China or a USA or any European country, the amount of carbon emitted per capita is much more than in, say, a poor African or South American or South Asian country. But ultimately, once you have emitted poisonous pollution gas, air pollution especially, it spreads evenly all over the planet. So I may not have polluted, but I'm gonna suffer equally. In fact, I may suffer more because of certain climatic conditions, local factors. Mm, so one of the ideas is that in case a country has polluted more, every country has got a limit कि आप इतना pollute कर सकते हो, उससे ज्यादा नहीं. तो अगर आपने pollution से ज्यादा किया, तो या तो आप penalty दो इसको, तो आपका नाम खराब होता है, या you can buy carbon credits from a country which is below. Now Peru obviously will pollute less on average than Switzerland will. So Switzerland is now going to offset its carbon emissions by buying carbon credits from Peru. Peru earns money, Switzerland gets a better deal out of it rather than paying a penalty. Doesn't sound good to pay a penalty to the regulatory body, right? So that's the idea behind this. जस्ट मैंने टिप ऑफ द आइसबर्ग बताया, इस पे पूरा स्टॉक मार्केट है, इवन इंडिया में है, गांधीनगर के गिफ्ट सिटी में. सो बहुत कुछ चल रहा है अभी. क्लाइमेट चेंज इज अ रियली एक्साइटिंग थिंग. इट्स अ टेरिबल थिंग, बट इट ऑल्सो लीड्स टू अ लॉट ऑफ एक्साइटिंग बिजनेस propositions around that. Right, just looking into the timing, some more miscellaneous content. So Bahamas, very small country. Please take a look, everyone. US के पास है, it is there on the Atlantic Ocean, North Atlantic Ocean. It's not part of the West Indies. People often confuse it with the West Indies, but it's not far either. A former British colony. I think the UK still has some territorial rights over the Bahamas. The Bahamas is also infamous for being an offshore banking hub. अब ऑफशोर बैंकिंग क्या है, मैं अगेन कभी बताऊंगा आपको डिटेल में, बट बेसिकली दीज आर टैक्स हेवंस जहाँ पे लोकल टैक्स आर वेरी लेस. So a lot of companies through various means they transfer their money to these countries. Mauritius is another example. India loses a lot of money every year thanks to a lot of these international loopholes in the taxing system. Bahamas में बहुत सारा पैसा जाता है which has not been earned in that country. So other countries lose their taxes, but a part of that money which does get into Bahamas. So it's a pretty rich country because a lot of that money then gets diverted to local businesses. It's a way, it's a clean method, it's a white method of money laundering in many ways. But Bahamas has now also issued a digital currency. It's the first case of a central bank doing such a thing. Bahamas is also, it's also famous for beauty. Its tourism attracts a lot of tourists, especially from USA, which is a neighboring country, and from the UK, because there are these historical, even now political ties. A lot of these billionaires from the UK are located in, are based in the Bahamas. And finally, one more thing I would like to talk about this country. It's there's a very famous, shall we say, bartender, celebrity bartender, mixologist, Sky John. He runs this YouTube channel, Tipsy Bartender. So he produces beautiful cocktails, and he is a very famous personality from this country. So this digital currency is called sand dollar. Now मैं इतनी सारी irrelevant facts क्यों बताता हूँ, मैं सीधा पहुंच जाता सैंड डॉलर पे. मैंने क्यों एक बारटेंडर की बात करी, क्यों मैंने ऑफशोर बैंकिंग की बात करी? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इट्स नॉट irrelevant, but more importantly the advantage of having these 3D classes where you're listening, speaking and hearing, and viewing. One of the advantages is that mind has to create tags. अगर आप बस ये पढ़ो तो ये रट्टेबाजी, आप भूल जाओगे. लेकिन when you talk of five other things, then the mind has ways of retaining information, and that is why जो भी points है, मैं बस points पढ़ के खत्म कर सकता हूँ, मेरा जल्दी खत्म हो जाएगा, मुझे क्या दिक्कत है. But I want to have a discussion so that these tags are made in your mind. Yeah, as I said, it's an archipelago nation near Florida. Florida is on the extreme southeast of USA. Miami, is a famous city. Miami, Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa. These are famous cities in Florida. Archipelago is a group of islands, right? Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, moving from Bahamas to Saudi Arabia, Saudi in the Middle East, of course, is a country which has long been infamous for its lack of human rights or lack of equal rights given to women, which is about half the country's resident population, native citizen population at least. Migrants are mostly male, but the local population, women did not have until recently any equal rights. But now a lot of things have taken place since Mohammed bin Salman emerged as the heir to the throne. He now controls the country in many ways because the King Abdullah, he is not very well right now. So Mohammed bin Salman does do a lot of the governing. Now, sometime back, couple of years back, symbolically 10 women were afforded this thing, driving licenses. That was revolutionary. In Saudi, there was a law that any woman who goes out of her apartment has to be accompanied by a male relative, uh, either husband or son or brother or father. That law has also been scrapped now. I'm not sure how much this is actually going to practically help this particular one. It might sound like, shall we say, brushing the real problems under the carpet, but at least some efforts have been taken, and I think we should appreciate this. So, free golf to women across the kingdom. It's a kingdom, Saudi. It's ruled by a royal family. It's an absolute monarchy. So, company operating this is the Ladies First Club. It's the name of the company. Right. Okay, let's take a look at now at some of the new industrial guidelines. We've spoken a lot, I mean, not in our classes, but generally, I'm sure you guys have been exposed a lot to the farm laws and subsequent protests. But there is also something about the industrial guidelines which need to be understood. So, the Union Labor Minister, Shri Santosh Gangwar, he released new series of guidelines. Now, ये base year क्या होता है थोड़ा समझ लेते हैं. I'm sure you've all heard of inflation. Have you not heard of inflation? Right, I'm sure you've all heard of this term inflation. Inflation का मतलब है general price rise. Now inflation हम किसके against measure करेंगे? That is a big challenge because you can't just measure it every year against the previous year. So you always have a base year against which you calculate. Now base year भी आप बहुत देर तक एक ही base year नहीं use कर सकते because after a while that will not be all that relevant, you know, because obviously over a period of time there will be inflation. So what we have done is there used to be a base year 2004 or 5 that was changed to 2011-12 in 2017 because obviously it loses relevance after a while. Now this year it is not for all sectors, only one sector. So at this point कोई आपसे पूछे base year आप 2011-12 बोलोगे 11-12 because financial year ends as you know today 31st March. But now only for the labor productivity to understand the labor incomes they have changed it to 2016. It's not 16-17, it's a calendar year 16 because some states have adopted Jan to December cycle financial year like Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand. So Sri Santosh Gangwar, he is the Minister of State for Labor and Employment. Minister of State is technically number 2 below the Cabinet Minister, but in this case there is no Cabinet Minister, which is why for all practical purposes the Minister of State is द कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर, इसीलिए ब्रैकेट में लिखा है इंडिपेंडेंट चार्ज. Just like the Ministry of Statistics and Policy Implementation, headed by Shri uh, ये Ravinderjeet Singh, who's the MP from Gurugram. Same thing there. So he's an 8-time BJP MP and all the time from the same, just like we saw about Mr. Paswan, multiple times MP from Hajipur in Bihar. He has been 8 times MP from Bareilly, which is in West Central UP. Yeah. Okay. Okay, some more of the October current affairs. Now, Chris Gayle from the West Indies, you know, is a legendary cricketer. While he's done very well in Test cricket and one day internationals, the one area in which he's truly made his name is 2020. Whether it is the IPL or several other franchisee based leagues, he's always available. And now in 2020 history, he's become the first to hit 1,000 sixes. That is interesting. Now, I want to talk about this country, Lebanon. थोड़ा सा आप लेबनान का भी लोकेशन मैप पे देखिए. It's located in the Middle East. It's a former French colony. It's near Syria. But one of the challenges when Lebanon was created was the fact that it has very, um, I mean, there is no one, there are religious and sectarian divisions in the country. In order to ensure that peace pervades between the different religious groups, this form of government is known as, I'll write it down on the chat window, it's called concessional form of democracy. ठीक है, concessional form of concessional form of democracy is a system which is unique to Lebanon. Here, the president's post is always reserved for a Christian. That too. So Christians made up a bit more, but many have migrated out, and also more Muslims have migrated in from Palestine. So that has changed the demographics. But around 40% of the population today is Christian, out of which around 22% are Maronite Christians. Even among Christians, there are sects. So in Lebanon, you have these Maronite Christians who make up 22% on or about half, little over half of the Christian population. President is always a Maronite Christian. The Prime Minister is always a Sunni Muslim. So around 29% population is Sunni. Around 26% are Shia Muslims. The Speaker of the Legislative Council of the Parliament is always a Shia. There's also fourth religion. It's a local religion called Druze, Druze. That's a local community in Lebanon. So they basically draw their inspiration from several religions. It's a local religion based on Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even some tenets from Hinduism and Buddhism they have adopted. They are about 6% of the country. Right. So the new prime minister under this law is Mr. Saad Hariri. Okay, so basically, this might sound might look very text heavy, which is not the ideal way in which a PPT should be designed. But basically, because my video comes towards the left, ताकि आपको दिखे, I've shifted all the content. I've had to compress everything on the right hand side. तभी ऐसा दिख रहा है. But I'll take care from the next PPT perhaps. So Sudan has agreed to take steps to normalize relations. So yet another case of the Abraham Accords. So Abraham Accord में थोड़ा in brief आपको समझा ही दूँ. I can't keep running away from this topic. Basically, I'll go back 2000 years back. I know it's a bit long, but चलिए और पहले पहुंच जाता हूँ. 3000 साल पहले पहुंच जाता हूँ. So the first monotheistic religion in the world, or one of the first major monotheistic religions in the world, was founded. Monotheism is where you believe in one god. Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, and all religions which are ancient human beings only worshipped the elements, the sun, moon, wind, animals which were useful like the cow, or which they're scared of like the tiger. That's how all ancient religions were. They were polytheistic, believing in multiple deities instead of gods. I should say multiple deities. But then Judaism became the first major monotheistic religion. It emerged in the Middle Eastern region. Judaism was in many ways the origin behind two more major religions emerging. So around 2000 years back there was Christianity, and another 600 years further, so 1400 years from before now, was the birth of Islam. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all three monotheistic religions which arose in the same area, more or less the Middle Eastern Levant region. Now, Christianity and Islam became very big religions. They're the two biggest religions in terms of adherents globally right now, more than a billion followers of both. Judaism, however, never grew much because of certain laws which prohibited conversion, and which meant that you need to have a Jewish mother in order to be a Jew yourself. So the religion remained very ethnic, confined to a region, and over a period of time, because the numbers did not grow within that region of where you have modern day Israel. It is the different Christian and Muslim kingdoms which sort of dominated that region, especially a lot of Islamic kingdoms. So Jews then basically left the Middle Eastern region. They migrated to Europe, not all of them, but many of them, a large, maybe I think a majority migrated to Europe. Jews were also a business community in many ways similar to, let's say, just giving an example, like the Marwadis in India, a strong trading business community. So they became very strong when it came to banking and trade. They became the major traders, money lenders, bankers in Europe. Over the next few thousand odd years, relations with Christians in Europe remained more or less stable, although there were times of persecution, but by and large it remained peaceful until Adolf Hitler became the president of Germany, the Chancellor of Germany. And after that, Germany started this movement called the Holocaust. So I think very quickly I've covered 3000 years of history. So I hope you appreciate that. So in around the 1930s, after when Hitler became the chancellor, slowly and steadily the Jews started being discriminated against. A lot of Jews migrated outside, whoever could migrate. So about 6 million Jews were butchered in Europe, 3 million of them in Poland. And so globally there was a wave of sympathy for the Jewish people. The British, who were then ruling Palestine region, Israel, Palestine, just like they were ruling India, they promised the Jewish people a homeland, you know, as a matter of this thing. So a lot of Jews who survived the Holocaust, they moved to the Middle Eastern region, and in 1948, the country of Israel was founded. However, there were Muslim people already living there, and basically the Holocaust took place in Europe, not in any of the Arab countries. Rather, under Turkish rule, many Jews prospered over the centuries, but unfortunately it was in Palestine that their historical home was. So that's where their country was formed. So that led to hundreds of thousands of Arab speaking Muslims, Palestinians especially, who had to leave their homes. And since then, in the last 70 odd years, there have been a lot of tensions between Arabs and Jews. Several wars have been fought, and Israel has won all of them. In spite of facing sort of a united opposition at times, Israel has generally won them all. They have a very strong military. They have good backing from the US as well. A lot of the top bankers in the US are also Jewish. So that probably helps. Now, in 1979, Egypt normalized relations. It became the first Arabic country to normalized diplomatic ties with Israel. In 1994, which is 15 years later, Jordan became the second. उसके बाद another 25 years, no progress. But in 2020, United Arab Emirates became the third country. It's called so they became the third, first for 2020. Bahrain joined, that became the fourth, and now we have Sudan. That has been followed by Morocco. So as of now, it's six countries, four in 2020. Also, Oman has already clarified they want to go ahead, while Saudi Arabia has opened the airspace. So civilian aircraft from Israel can move above Saudi territory and vice versa. So normal, they were not in a war as such, but it's now diplomatic ties which have started. Again, among the many reasons for this, we can speculate on that relations with Qatar, Turkey, Iran. There are many factors which are involved, but at this point, this is something we can understand. Please take notes. जो मैंने बताया वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. मैं एक और क्लास में फिर से पढ़ाऊंगा जिसमें नोट्स रहेंगे, बट अभी के लिए मैंने आपको इतना वर्बली बता दिया. ठीक है. और एक और चीज आपको जानना है फाइनली इज दैट यूएसए वाज एन इंटरमीडियरी. नाउ यूएसए इज अ क्रिश्चियन majority country, Israel is a Jewish country, while these are all Muslim countries, which is why they're called Abraham Accords, because Abraham is considered the patriarch of these three religions. These three religions are often known as the Abrahamic Faiths. Abraham is a biblical character. From it was his progeny which populated the entire Middle Eastern, the Israel Canaan region. So that's why they are known as the Abrahamic faiths, these three religions. Just like religions born in India, they are called Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism. So a lot of these Middle Eastern religions, they are together clubbed as the Abrahamic faiths. So that's why it's the Abraham Accords. Accords because a number of peace ties. Right. Let's continue further then. Hope you've all understood. So now I want to talk about something called the Sakharov Prize. It is the highest human rights prize awarded by the European Union. European Union, based in Belgium, Brussels is the headquarters. Now 27 members because the UK is no more a member, but it was at this time. Prize named after a Russian Nobel Prize winning physicist, Andrei Sakharov, who actually faced persecution in his homeland. He fled from the Soviet Union at the peak of the Cold War. This is another topic which I'll talk to you in detail, the opposition movement in Belarus. But that is them and their leader, Ms. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who were given this award. So Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, she was the opposition leader in Belarus, and Belarus has had the same president for the last 25 years. There was a lot of accusation of dictatorship. So she emerged as the face of the opposition. They lost the election, and then she fled to neighboring Lithuania. And there's a lot of street protests in the capital of Minsk, which was repressed using a lot of force by the Belarus military and the police, right? And the Minsk police. So that's pretty much it. And they have been given this award. I'll just get myself some water. Give me a moment, please. Meanwhile, we'll do more of October current affairs. Yeah, small bottle this time because I think the class is about to get over. Right, so some more of the October current affairs. Now, Jammu and Kashmir has become the first UT in the country. You know, it's now a union territory since Article 370 was abolished. They have operationalized PFMS at the district level. So let's just understand what exactly does it stand for. It stands for the Public Financial Management System. Meanwhile, Aman Singh, he's a turbaned Sikh who has been elected. So a lot of Sikhs have been appointed in the past in the various state assemblies in Canada, which has a large Sikh population, but none of them in British Columbia. And even if they have been, they were not turbaned. So this is a symbolic thing. That's where obviously Aman Singh has made history. Those earlier, they were non-turbaned. right? So British Columbia is in the westernmost corner of Canada. I'm sure you've heard of Vancouver. Vancouver is a major city in British Columbia, right? He belongs to this party called NDP, which stands for the New Democratic Party. Right. Now I want to talk about Seychelles, country completely on the other side of Canada. Seychelles, just located on the map. I'll give you 30 seconds, guys, or 45 seconds if you want. एक बार जरा देखिए Seychelles कहाँ located है. I'll give you an example. It's an island nation. So look for islands. Right. So, in case you have located, Seychelles is an island nation on the Indian Ocean. It's officially part of Africa, but it's pretty far from the African mainland. As I said, on the Indian Ocean, it's relatively near the country of Mauritius. Again, not that close either, but Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, these are all island nations on the Indian Ocean, right? Seychelles was a former French colony. Now, a little bit on these French colonies, or let's say, okay, let me just put it on. There's somebody of Indian origin. His name is Vavel Ram Kalawan. As the name suggests, he's of Indian origin. His great grandfather, so that's like what, five generations, no, three generations before him, he was an indentured laborer from Bihar. He won the presidential election in Seychelles with a solid majority. So थोड़ा सा मैं अगर बताऊं about these Indian migrations as indentured laborers. Now, a lot of these countries, island nations, especially in the Caribbean, like Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, which is not an island nation, but yes, on the Caribbean, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda. Then you can look up to, let's say, on the Indian Ocean, you have Fiji, Malaysia, Seychelles, Mauritius, Reunion Islands, South Africa. So in some of these countries, the Europeans had established plantations. In USA, of course, as well. These plantations, the idea was to have laborers, because obviously plantations, they produce sugar, cocoa, and cotton, tobacco. You require a lot of labor, and that labor has to be run with a lot of discipline, if I may use such a term. So they needed laborers, and they needed laborers who could be coerced into working forcefully. So they got slaves from Africa to work on these plantations. But by the end of the 18th century, there was a global movement against slavery, which was seen as inhuman to own a human being. And a lot of the Christian churches as well opposed it. So, Great Britain, which had actually for long been the world's largest slaver, in the 19th century passed a law in 1807 reversing their hundreds of years of encouragement towards slavery by banning the slave trade. In 1807, Britain banned the slave trade. Not only did they ban the slave trade, the Britain spent a lot of money in the next 3 decades fighting ships from all over the world which were illegally transporting slaves, or even from countries where slave trade was still legal. So Britain at that time was the world's preeminent power. So generally, a lot of the countries, they fell in line because they said no to slavery. The others as well accepted it. In 1833, slavery was completely abolished. 1807, slave trade was abolished, so you can't take fresh slaves from Africa, but the ones existing in these countries, they can continue. You can't do much about internal laws. 1833, the entire practice was banned, and but then you needed labor, right? So because a lot of the black slaves from Africa, they sort of got free and they started doing other stuff. Many of them stayed in labor, of course, but some of them, at least, there was some sort of a loss. So they were replaced by indentured laborers. India, you can't have slavery, but you took indentured laborers. They used to go for a period, typically 7 years. Once that period is over, theoretically at least they can come back. For all practical purposes, because of the distances involved and the mode of communication back then, these indentured laborers ended up become having lives like slaves. So there wasn't too much of a difference, but at least on paper they were free after these 7 years. So some of these they've migrated to a lot of countries. I'm sure you guys have seen Indian origin players in the cricket team of West Indies. People like Sunil Narayan, Darren Ganga, Mahindra Nagamutu, Shiv Narayan Chandapal, who played for various teams. So this is another example of Indians. So Seychelles, as I said, island nation of the African mainland, not far from Mauritius, not that near, but by ocean lengths, not too far. Right, former French colony, as I mentioned, a lot of these beauty pageants are also held here because such a beautiful place, ideal sort of a honeymooning location. Right, some more information on this. So this has actually been a remarkable election. It's the first peaceful transfer of power since 1976. It's what, 45 years? That's incredible. A lot of these African countries don't have, shall we say, stable democracies. So whenever there's a change, you often have violence that erupts. So not in this case. This person, his party is the SNP, which is the Seychelles National Party. The Indo-Seychellois, they first arrived as slaves. Now, if you look at the year 1770, that's before slavery was abolished. So the Indians who went before that, they were slaves, not indentured laborers. So they arrived first in 1717. They are a significant visible minority. They're just 6%, but 6% means visible minority. Majority means you're more than 50, but and especially on some islands, they are more than 6%. So they can actually sweep elections in those areas, their candidates. Right. Continuing with now back to some miscellaneous content. Now this is interesting. The world's first iodine-based sanitizers, they have been built in India. They are more long-lasting than alcohol-based hand cleansers. It's produced by a Singapore-based company, but it's produced in India. The technology is Indian. The ownership is Singapore. I mean, the company's ownership is Singapore. So it's called I2Cure. That's the name of the company based out of Singapore. Singapore, of course, has a large Indian population as well in Southeast Asia, mostly of Tamil origin. Unlike, say, the West Indies, where people went mostly from Bihar, Eastern UP, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, etc. Right. The union minister. Now, this is something I want to talk about, the Fit India Walkathon. What is this? Another union minister, Shri Kiren Rijiju. He's a multiple times MP from the state of Arunachal Pradesh. He's from the BJP. Uh, Arunachal didn't have much of a BJP presence back in the day, but he has been one of the front runners, one of the pioneers for the party in that region. So he flagged off a 200-kilometer long Fit India Walkathon. This was organized by a border guarding force, the ITBP. ITBP is pretty much one of the paramilitary forces. Paramilitary forces are the ones that help out the military as well, right? So ITBP is the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, as the name suggests, mostly stationed along the long border we share with Tibet, which of course now is Chinese territory. Right, Sri Kiren Rijiju, as I said, he's a three times BJP MP. I think he lost in 2009, but he's won in 14 and 19. He's been an MP last two terms and won in 2004. That's when he established the party for the first time there. Right, some more of the miscellaneous content. Now, the first project under the CPEC was inaugurated in Lahore. China and Pakistan, they have been close allies for the last couple of years. Allies is probably a um, slightly difficult word to use here because the general understanding is that Pakistan has been ripped off its asset. Chinese friendship is often a dangerous thing for a lot of these smaller countries. I'm not suggesting that we should have bad relations with China. I'm not suggesting that. That's a separate point. In fact, India has taken positive steps towards increasing trade. Trade is always a good thing, but there is also the other aspect where China acquires certain piece of land. There's this thing called the Chinese debt trap. They give you a loan which you're unable to pay, and then they'll acquire land of your country. It's often compared to neo imperialism. पहले imperialism होता था जब a country would occupy another. आज के दिन वो नहीं होता, but ऐसे indirect means से countries and organizations are controlling others' territories. So Pakistan will remain on the grey list of the global terror financing watchdog, which is the FATF, FATF, due to an inability to fulfill 6 out of the 27 mandates. So had it done all 27, it would have been upgraded from uh, grey to something more neutral. But had it not been able to do these 21 either, then it would have gone down to blacklist. India was pushing for Pakistan to be included in the blacklist. FATF is a body which Financial Action Task Force, which looks into money laundering for terror purposes. Money laundering का मतलब है ब्लैक मनी को व्हाइट में कन्वर्ट करना यूजिंग shall we say small पैकेट्स को व्हाइट में मिक्स करके then nobody really traces it. Again, just tip of the iceberg what I'm saying. But money laundering, hawala is another method of doing that. Hawala is something where Pakistan and the Middle East are involved in. So that's what India wanted. There are also some observers who feel Pakistan being grey list is actually a good thing for India. Once they're on blacklist, they'll stop caring. We have nothing to care. At least on grey list, they'll think at least chalo grey pe maintain karte hain, black mein na pahunche. So that is a positive thing many commentators have mentioned. Right? So we'll talk about FATF in detail later on. Even Saudi is now a member of it, right? Okay. The former US security contractor, Mr. Edward Snowden, he was criticized for a lot of leaks. So he has been granted permanent residency in Russia. Meanwhile, I think this is pretty obvious. अगर आपको मून पे moon has low gravity, low its atmosphere is not strong enough. That's why it has so many craters. It's कहते हैं ना चांद में दाग है. So that's why you need, if you want to establish cellular communication there, obviously आप किससे करोगे? Nokia आपको पता है कहीं भी गिरता है टूटता नहीं है. So Nokia is a cellular company chosen by NASA to build the first cellular network on the moon. This will help a lot of the astronauts in the future in case there are to be moon landings, and who knows, eventually moon tourism. Some of the some top business tycoons like Richard Branson and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they've all floated companies with the idea being to have space tourism in the future, especially on the moon. So this is a little bit on the politics side. So Mr. Farooq Abdullah, some of you may have heard, he's been a multiple times chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir. His son Omar Abdullah has also been the chief minister. He's presently a member of parliament in the Lok Sabha, heads the party National Conference. Now he's the chairperson of a conglomerate which has been created. Conglomerate is a business term. We don't use it for politics, but in this case we do. So the Abdullah's residence is called the Gupkar. That area is called Gupkar. So after a lot of these leaders started getting released, when Article 370 was abrogated, a lot of the local leaders like Sajjad Lone, Mehbooba Mufti, and the Abdullahs, they were imprisoned or put under house arrest. Over time, now that they have kept, they have now, I think, all of them been released. So they formed this alliance to fight, to press for Article 370 restoration once again. And this body was called the PAGD, or People's Alliance for Gupkar Election Declaration. They fought an election recently together. There were the district council elections in JNK. And yes, unsurprisingly, they swept most of Kashmir and ended up having maximum number of seats if you include the whole of Jammu and Kashmir. The BJP pretty much was the largest, biggest party in the Jammu region, and not so well in Kashmir. So that is pretty much. The Congress was initially willing to join this, but ended up not joining this Gupkar alliance. So now I want to talk about this body called ICANN. So it's the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. In fact, they won the Nobel Peace Prize, I think in 2016. Definitely, I remember a couple of years back. Um, so the UN has announced 50 countries that have ratified a UN treaty to ban nuclear weapons, triggering its entry into force in 90 days. एंड द हॉन्डुरस का लोकेशन देख लीजिए, सेंट्रल अमेरिका में है. सेंट्रल इज टाइनी वेज ऑफ लैंड बिटवीन नॉर्थ अमेरिका एंड साउथ अमेरिका. वहां पे काफी और कंट्रीज भी है, स्पेनिश स्पीकिंग कंट्रीज मोस्टली, लाइक एल साल्वाडोर, and you have Nicaragua, Guatemala, Panama, Mexico. That's a much bigger country. So in that region, you have these countries. ठीक है? They did qualify, I think, for the 2010 Football World Cup as well. Right, as I said, between North and South America. Okay, and finally, I think this is the last slide before I talk about the grade up stuff. So NASA has this satellite called Sophia. It's confirmed for the first time water on the sunlit surface of the moon. So this is an interesting new development. It's called Sophia, stands for Stratospheric Observatory. At the stratosphere, it is located. It's a permanently located there. Observatory for infrared astronomy. India and the US, meanwhile, have held the third bilateral 2+2 talks at the ministerial level. They've signed the BK. It's called 2+2 because it's foreign and defense of both countries. Foreign defense India, foreign defense USA. That's why it's 2+2. So India has also done a 2+2 with Japan. That was done some months ago. याद रखना उस चीज को. So this is interesting. They've signed the BECA, which is the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. So India, of course, represented by Mr. Rajnath Singh, who's the Defense Minister, and Mr. S. Jaishankar, who's the External Affairs Minister. So this, of course, at that time, Donald Trump was still the president. So it's a Trump administration which was handling this. Okay, now the UAE has allowed 100% FDI in some of the sectors, some of the projects, like in agriculture, industry, and service. This is to boost further business. Now, you must understand that crude oil prices are at an all-time low. A lot of these countries were almost completely dependent on oil for their survival. Now, with crude oil prices so low, they are banking on other means of making money. So, the UAE, as usual, has been one of the front runners, approved by the ADED, which stands for Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development. Now, this point, the last one which I've shown you, is very, very, very important. Probably the most important of today. इसको please थोड़ा सा note down कीजिए, because Aditya Puri has been one of the legendary bankers in this country. 25 साल से he ran HDFC. Many of you might not know, but HDFC is India's biggest bank, and it is overall the third biggest company in India, only behind Reliance and TCS. It is the third biggest is HDFC. With Aditya Puri retiring, it is Mr. Shashidhar Jagdishan who has taken charge as the new CEO of HDFC. So Jagdishan has been an employee for several years, but now, of course, he becomes the head. I was telling you about Gift City a while back. Gift City is based in Gandhinagar. So the UK has entered into a strategic partnership to develop India's International Financial Services Center. They're now going to set up a fund of funds to be managed by the SBI Group. ताकि बाद में UK का जो भी फ्यूचर में कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हो इंडिया का, वो सारा इसके थ्रू राउटेड होगा इंडिया में. There's one center for all of that. And this person has been appointed as the new Chief Information Commissioner. His name is Sri Yashwardhan Kumar Sinha. This is a post that is responsible for all kinds of information at a certain level. ठीक है, जो भी ऑफिशियल इंफॉर्मेशन गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से निकल रहा है, दैट हैज टू फ्लो वाया द चीफ इलेक्शन कमिश्नर. So he has been appointed recently. One of the important appointments, please mark a star. It's an important point, this one. Okay. Meanwhile, in Assam, it's become the first state to add this. This is really progressive. Kudos to the state government for becoming the first to add a transgender option in the gender category in the civil services examination form. Otherwise, In every other state, you have male and female options only. Some of them may have others, but openly transgender karke, this is something revolutionary. Kudos for the human rights aspect, and approved by the APSC, which stands for the Assam Public Service Commission. Moving on from Assam completely to the other side of the country is Kerala, the first state to fix the floor price for vegetables. This is in relation to the MSP. MSP is usually not for these for perishable products like vegetables, but Kerala. This is not exactly MSP, but Kerala has made some start to fix something like this. It's at around 20% above the production cost. आपको दिखाना पड़ेगा estimate of production में कितना cost जाता है, उसके ऊपर जो भी vegetable हो उसके ऊपर 20% add कर दिया जाएगा. Right, so I'm done with the content. You can write this down, everyone. In the meanwhile, I'll move ahead. So this is the new batch I was talking about. Rabia is a fellow GK trainer. Ashutosh, he's a top teacher for quants and reasoning. While Sanojam, you can see the experience. 17 years of teaching verbal ability. So they are the ones who are going to take care of your batch. I will be starting my own batch pretty soon, hopefully. But for now, you can join this. This is the number which I had earlier shared as well for any queries. राइट our टैगलाइन सही प्रेप है तो लाइफ सेट है. तो ये हमारा यूट्यूब चैनल है, प्लीज देख लीजिए. आई एम श्योर सम ऑफ यू अटेंडेड दिस क्लास ऑन यूट्यूब. इट्स अ टेलीग्राम एज वेल. वी हैव आवर चैनल. So this is something for BBA and hotel management discussions. Right, this is a good time to buy. There are lots of offers, so please avail them, and you get practice topic wise quizzes you can practice as well as keep attending these live classes. Right, Google Play में भी आपको हमारा app मिल जाएगा. Right, so on that note, I am ending this session. Thank you so much, guys. Wonderful interacting with you all. Hopefully you all understood the topics. So I'll clear it off now. Thank you so much, guys.